Britain's new ambassador to the US looks set to call on the help of Reform UK leader Nigel Farage to help him win over Donald Trump's administration. But after Lord Mandelson said this in 2019, is there any hope of a UK and USA relationship?
With an American president who is little short of a white nationalist and racist. Even those who have a sneaking admiration for Donald Trump because of the strength of his personality, nonetheless regard him as reckless and a danger to the world.
So let's get the thoughts of James Matthewson, former Labour spokesman. Morning, James. Thanks for joining us this morning. So what do you make of this choice of Lord Mandelson to be the man to help forge this relationship between the UK and the US? What a choice.
What a choice indeed. Peter Mandelson is, the chief of the dark arts from the new Labour era of spin doctors, and he's long been known in the Labour movement, as the Prince of Darkness, and he's one of these people who can effectively kind of cajole people who normally can't be brought together and get things done that can't be done otherwise. So I think he's a very, very effective operator. In this position itself, you're going to struggle to find anyone in the Labour Party who hasn't insulted or, criticised, at the very least, Donald Trump and Donald Trump's kind of politics. So, his comments about Donald Trump, I don't think they'll bear any relevance, especially with Donald Trump surrounding himself with people, including his vice president, J.D. Vance, who called him America's Hitler, so it seems
No, J.D. Vance, no, we have to correct you on that. J.D. Vance wrote a text message to somebody when he was at college that said, I oscillate between thinking he's the saviour of the world and that he might be Hitler. Like he said this in a kind of, he might be one or the other. And like many people, he feels very differently about Donald Trump. I add myself to that particular list. But the thing about Mandelson, of course, is that politics has moved on. And there'll be people listening to this who could kind of barely remember what Mandelson did when he was in office. Just tell people why he was so associated with the idea of him being sort of the master of the dark arts. And is that relevant in 2024?
Yeah, it's just because he's been an effective political operator. He's not from my side of the Labour Party at all. He's somebody that I, as factions go in the Labour Party, would be quite opposed to normally. But in a position like this, it's almost the perfect place for him because he is somebody who gets things done. He's somebody who is able to keep things moving. And of course, that era of politics, from the late 90s, early 2000s of Blair's government. I was only born in 1994, so, it's hardly like I remember this firsthand. But of course, this is well studied throughout anybody who's worked in the Labour Party, and these stories are still talked about as to how he's stabbed people in the back and manoeuvred politically and all the rest of it. And people look to that with some admiration who work in politics. But I do think it takes somebody, a very strong character and very strong will and political experience to handle somebody like Donald Trump, and especially the people Donald Trump has surrounded himself with. So Peter Mandelson may well be the perfect appointment for that task.
But he's so associated with old school Labour, with Blairite politics. He's associated really with the opposite of what Donald Trump and his administration wants to be. And this is a man who has to go out there and fight for this country, to fight for the UK in our relationship with the USA, particularly in terms of trade. And you say he's associated with the dark arts. That's not something which can recommend you. You say that might make you a good politician, but I don't think that's necessarily what we need in 2024. He spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein. He spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein. And so there are questions to be asked about why him? Why? I think I, for one, just don't really understand this appointment.
Well, Donald Trump himself, we're talking here about a man who, and we've had this dispute before, Bev, where I, called him a rapist. You said he's not a rapist. The woman who took him to court and found that he'd raped her, E.J. Carroll will disagree with you on that. But, this is a man who has absolutely no moral standing in the world whatsoever. Nobody believes that Donald Trump is a moral man. Donald Trump is the opposite of a moral person. So the question whether Peter Mandelson is moral enough to deal with him, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. What matters is that our interests as a country are handled, and standing up to Donald Trump, that's the only chance that we have in being able to put forward our best interests as a country.
So obviously Nigel Farage, as we know, has a great relationship with the president-elect, and he has said that he will help negotiate that relationship, and that he will help. That's surely a very magnanimous thing to say. It would be easy to step aside and say, well, I'll only help when I'm Prime Minister. But the fact that he's saying, I will help Mandelson if I can do so at this point, surely that should be, the reaction to that should be positive from the Labour Party.
Well, it's very kind of Nigel, isn't it, to volunteer to do that? Of course he's doing so. It's a trap. Now, what he doesn't expect, he wants the Labour Party to stand up and say, no, not a chance, get back, we'll sort this out, because then that puts him in a position to be able to say, look, if only I was in charge, we would have a better relationship. But of course, Peter Mandelson already is doing the smart thing here and saying, oh, great, yeah, come on board, Nigel, you can help me with it. You can be tied to this entire relationship, and if things go south, you can be associated with it as well, because Nigel Farage has a lot to gain from his relationship with Donald Trump, as we've seen already, and through his connections to Elon Musk, who's looking at bankrolling his bid to be the next Prime Minister of this country. So it's very smart from Peter Mandelson to say, yeah, come on board, get involved.
Wouldn't you rather Nigel Farage says, yes, I will help, than say, no, I will not?
I mean, it depends, but I mean, if he's able to help,
but on what?
Then
If
great,
it's going to be in our interest for our country, then surely that's a good thing for Nigel Farage to say, I don't mind brokering that relationship. It seems like the American administration think Mandelson is a piece of work. Well, let me help get involved for the sake of the country.
If we think that Nigel Farage is doing so for the sake of the country, I don't think Nigel Farage has ever done anything in interest other than his own interest. So it'll be interesting to see how far that goes and how much work he's willing to do. So I think Peter Mandelson's right to invite him in, get him on board, see what he can do to broker the relationship. But don't forget, this is a Labour government. It is a government that is left-wing. It is a government that is left of centre. It is the opposite of what Donald Trump is and what Nigel Farage is. So for them to try and, capitulate on certain things, they need to stand firm. Nigel Farage can only do so much and have so much influence in that.
But surely the whole point of that political difference of those two administrations means you need somebody to broker that deal. And if Nigel Farage had turned around and said, I'm not getting involved in this, it's not my problem, that would be Nigel Farage acting for himself, surely.
No, it's about playing games. It's about playing games. It's Nigel Farage offering help. He's not doing so with the genuine hope of trying to get a Labour government to have a good relationship with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Nigel Farage want the Labour government of Britain to fail. Elon Musk, who's looking at giving Nigel Farage $100 million to fund him, has called Britain a tyrannical police state. He's called the Labour Party a communist government. These are not people who have any interest in this government succeeding. They're trying to undermine it at every turn. Nigel Farage will be doing exactly that. But Peter Mandelson can invite him in and say, come and help, get involved, and let's see exactly what Nigel Farage does. But I'll tell you now, if lifting a finger to help the Labour Party succeed is something that Nigel Farage wants to do, we should have him on board 100%, let's see. But I do not believe for 1 minute that he will.